Here we have an application of solving a quadratic equation. We have this egg drop competition, uh, and they're going to train a container that prevents the egg from breaking when it's dropped from a height of 30 feet. We're going to use this formula, h equals negative 16t squared plus h sub naught. That's pronounced h sub 0 is h sub naught. That's your beginning, because we start 0 means at the beginning. Can be used for the number of seconds it takes for the container to reach height h for an initial height of h sub naught. I want to find it takes the time for the container to reach the ground. Basic question, what's the height of the ground? Well, the height of the ground is 0. So I'm going to replace h with 0 equals negative 16 t squared. My initial height was 30 feet, so I'll say plus 30. Now we solve it just like we do any equation. We want to isolate the t squared, so I'll minus 30 from both sides. And we'll get negative 30 equals negative 16 t squared. Well, divide both sides by negative 16. And since we're doing a real life application, I don't need to put it as a fraction. 30 divided by 16, we get t squared equals 1.875. And we take the square root of both sides. So t equals plus or minus, because remember we have two answers, the square root of 1.875. And that's like 1.37, we'll say. Now, can time be negative? No. So we throw out the negative for the application. The problem is correct. The algebra is correct. But for an application, it's going to say, we're going to say it's going to take about 1.37 seconds to hit the ground. Now in example 3, we're going to go back to what we did at the beginning of the lesson. I can't take the square root because I have an x squared and an x. So what do I do that? Well, I make sure it equals 0, just like it does, because we want to use the zero product property. I can factor 4x out, can't I? So 4x times x minus 3 equals 0. In other words, since I'm multiplying to 0, I know 4x equals 0 or x minus 3 equals 0. In the first case, if we divide by 4, probably could do that mentally, you get 0. Here we add 3, we get x equals 3. We have two answers, x equals 0 or x equals 3. That's what we do. Now on 4a, first we're going to solve it like we normally do. I want to factor this because it equals 0. Nothing goes in all three of them, but there's no number in front of x squared, so I want two numbers that multiply to negative 8, and they add to negative 2. Well, the two numbers that do that are negative 4 and positive 2, so I'm going to say x minus 4 times x plus 2 equals 0. Well, what minus 4, I'll write it down here, x minus 4 equals 0 or x plus 2 equals 0. Hopefully you can do this mentally. You don't have to do all these steps. So x equals 4, or subtract 2 from both sides, x equals negative 2. Now on the second part, we're going to use what we just learned to graph this quadratic. So I know I have two x-intercepts. One at positive 4. The other is at negative 2. And I know my parabola is a happy parabola because it's opening up. But how do I find where my vertex is at? Well, the vertex is going to be halfways between your intercepts. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go, my vertex, let's write that down there, is going to be the average of 4 and negative 2. So 4 plus negative 2 is 2, divided by 2 is 1. And then to find my vertex, I'm going to substitute that back into my equation. I don't care if you do the original equation or if you do the factored form. To me, the factored form is a lot easier to do mentally. So I'm going to replace x with 1. So I'm going to go 1 minus 4 times 1 plus 2. Because we're replacing x with 1 in our problem. So 1 minus 4 is negative 3. 1 plus 2 is 3. So I know my vertex is at 1 and negative 9. Now I've got 3 points. I can draw my parabola. Didn't quite hit my points there. There we go, a little bit closer. Smooth curve, make it a parabola, make it U-shaped. And that's what you do on that question.